Hey guys, today's episode of Sports Spectrum's podcast is presented by our friends at Compassion International. We love what Compassion stands for, what they're all about, releasing children from poverty in Jesus' name. Now, I've gotten to know their president, Jimmy Mayato, pretty well and see him at a few conferences that we're both at. And I got to tell you, he is as passionate a leader about helping to alleviate global poverty as anyone I've ever met. And all you got to do is listen to him talk for a few minutes and you realize that there is a real problem across the world with global poverty and how it affects children. And that's where Compassion comes in. And I love what Compassion is all about. It's why my family sponsors a child with Compassion, because we know what that means. That means giving a child who otherwise might be stuck in poverty forever, giving that child a chance, providing them with food and education and medical care and vocational training. It's all done in Jesus' name, introducing these children to the gospel of Jesus Christ because of your generous support. So go consider sponsoring a child. Go pray about it, and then maybe take that risk, take that leap. I promise you, you won't regret it. Go check out compassion.com/sportsspectrum. You'll see a list of children there, and pray about sponsoring a child today. Compassion International. Go to compassion.com/sportsspectrum.
This is Sports Spectrum, the intersection of sports and faith, where we bring Jesus back into the conversation. Here's your host, Jason Romano.
Hey guys, welcome to Sports Spectrum. I am Jason Romano. So glad that you're tuning into our show today. We are grateful and thankful for this ministry, the intersection of sports and faith, bringing Jesus back into the sports conversation, keeping Jesus into the sports conversation. And we have a really awesome sports conversation today coming up with Sammy Smith. Before we get to our conversation with Sammy, I want to tell you about our 52-week Increase devotional. Have you gotten your copy yet? It's available right now at theincrease.com or at Amazon. But I'm telling you, this is a great resource to grow in your faith. If you're leading a Bible study, maybe you have some athletes that you want to kind of guide through in their walk with Jesus, pick up this 52-week Increase devotional. Again, it's available at Amazon, or you can get it at theincrease.com. And that website, theincrease.com, it's revamped. It's got some great resources there. I'm telling you, you got to go check it out, theincrease.com, and pick up the 52-week Increase devotional. Now, our guest today, Sammy Smith. If you're a kid of the 80s and early 90s like myself, you remember Sammy Smith. He was a stud running back at Florida State University, and then got drafted in the first round, 9th overall by the Miami Dolphins in the 1989 NFL draft. And if you remember that 89 draft, that was Deion Sanders and Barry Sanders and Troy Aikman, just Hall of Famers up and down that first round draft pick board. And Sammy Smith went to the Miami Dolphins, 9th overall that year. He only played 3 seasons, though, with Miami. He then went to play one more season with the Denver Broncos, and then he was out of the league at the age of 26 years old, and kind of took a downturn, if you will, in his journey through life, really. And in 1996, he was convicted of 2 counts of possession and distribution of cocaine. He spent 7 years in prison. But man, does he have a redemption story on how God used that time when he was in prison to make his message, or I should say his mess, into an amazing message. And now he is currently the character development director at Ole Miss with their football team. He's their team chaplain working with FCA, the Fellowship of Christian Athletes. So God has totally turned this man, Sammy Smith's life around, and he's going to tell you all about it. What a story he has. Let's listen right now on Sports Spectrum to Sammy Smith. Hey, Sammy Smith, welcome to Sports Spectrum, buddy. How are you?
Oh, Jason, I'm excited, man. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Been looking forward to spending this time with you.
Yeah, me too. I'm glad we were able to get connected, and I'm excited to kind of have people hear your story. It's a powerful story. Before we kind of go down memory lane and kind of tell everybody what that journey was like for you, from college to the NFL, and then kind of walking through some difficult seasons of life for you. Why don't we talk about your current role with Ole Miss? I know you're the director of character development, kind of a team chaplain with the team. Can you just kind of explain to our audience what your role is with Ole Miss?
Well, I got blessed to work for Fellowship of Christian Athletes, actually here in Central Florida. Started in 2011. And then, 5-6 years into working in this area, God opened the door for me to go to University of Mississippi and serve under Coach Freeze, his last year there, to become their director of character development. So what I do is just, make myself available to help mentor coaches, mentor the players, help them grow spiritually, to be able to share my journey, and some of my experiences and the ups and downs of my journey, and how, God continued to pursue me through some difficult times, man, with the idea that I'll be able to offer something that will help them along in their journey.
Yeah, I have to imagine if I was talking to you 25 years ago, you would have laughed at me if I told you that you would be the director of character development for a school like Mississippi.
Yeah, I really had no connections with Mississippi. Getting that call from Coach Freeze, again, was just a God thing. I had never met him. Didn't know anything about the University of Mississippi, or for that matter, any of the schools in Mississippi. And it was just a mutual contact that put us together. I had the opportunity to speak at a First Baptist Church in Ocala. And it was a huge Ole Miss alumni there and fan that spent some time with me afterwards. And he wanted to know if I would be interested in going and speaking at an FCA breakfast at the University of Mississippi the next year. And I was like, yeah, I'd probably love to do that. Well, fast forward about 3 days later, I'm getting a call from Coach Freeze asking me to consider coming there to be his chaplain and director of character development. So God works in mysterious ways, man. He puts people together to accomplish his work.
Yeah, and it's so good. I know Coach Freeze pretty well, and it's so good to watch how God has redeemed his life too at Liberty, and all that he's been able to kind of overcome going through those difficult seasons, and his departure from Ole Miss to come to Liberty, and watch how the Lord has redeemed his life. I have to imagine that's been satisfying watching that too.
It has. We had a chance to play Liberty this year,
yes,
at the University of Mississippi, and just getting a chance to see him, man, and talk to him before the game. I know it was an emotional trip back to Oxford for him and his family, because he loves Ole Miss, and but just getting a chance to spend that time with him and to see him thriving in the role that he has there at Liberty, and being a great coach, great recruiter, motivating those guys, and continuing to live out his call that God has on him. So I'm super excited for him, and I'm thankful that God put us in each other's paths, and because it radically changed, the direction of my life, man. I went back to school after 31 years, leaving Florida State, and I graduated from the University of Mississippi, in 2020 of May. So, you never know what story God is writing when he moves you to do things. But, man, if you just are obedient, you'll be amazed with the trajectory that he'll take your life on.
Absolutely. Now, I think it's good to go back a little bit and kind of have people understand your journey and your story, because when I heard your name, and I don't remember who it was that introduced me to you or connected me with you or even suggested your name, but I said, is that the Sammy Smith who played at Florida State? I'm 48 years old. So I remember kind of the late 80s being in high school. I mean, I'm a huge sports fan now, but back then it was an obsession for me, almost an unhealthy obsession in high school for me. But I remember your name. I remember being in high school, watching you play at Florida State, being a first-round pick in 1989. So let's just go there a little bit. Who was Sammy Smith, the All-American from Florida State 30 years ago? Who was that guy?
Well, I was just a kid that grew up in a small town. You talked about Apopka and having, I think you said your brother lives there now.
My brother lives in Apopka,
Yeah, that's where I went to high school at, and I grew up in a little town, Zellwood. I'm actually here now visiting my mom for a few days. And, a guy that just wanted to have an opportunity, man, to play at the highest of levels, and fell in love with Coach Bowden and his staff there at a young age, and was super excited about going there and not only playing football, but running track and field there. And just got an opportunity, man. God blessed me with, some great ability, and I had a chance to see a lifelong dream come true, and that's to play major college football for a place that I love, Tallahassee and Florida State, and then to get drafted to play down in Miami was certainly a lifelong dream come true.
Tell me about the role faith played. I know the role it plays now. We kind of described that. What was that role of faith in your life growing up, and maybe even when you got into high school and all the accolades and getting into college, and certainly a guy like Coach Bobby Bowden, all you have to mention is his name, and where faith, lied in that man's life. Certainly it was at the top. But where was that for you kind of growing up in that progression of faith in the Lord?
Well, I grew up, church was right across the street from my house as a young kid. So,
yeah.
I went to the Sunday services, and I went to the midweek service. And so I had an experience of what faith was and what church was, but certainly it would be later on in life that I would have a real true experience, not just a little feeling that you get, when you go to church and you hear a great message, and man, you go up there and you accept Christ into your life, and you live good for a few days, and then you're right back to being yourself again. But it would be many years later, man, after a lot of trying times, difficult times. Some of them you may know about, some you don't, but I lost a son to SIDS, when he was 2 months old while I was playing for Miami Dolphins. And that was one of the lowest points of my life. And then some things thereafter but those were the things that set me up to have the encounter that God had planned for me, to really see what it was like to lean in and to trust God, and to ask him to come in and to change my life, and to help me navigate through this thing called life. And so it would be those things that caused me to have a real experience, and to really trust God, and to trust, Jesus Christ as my Savior.
Tell me about when you were at Florida State, and maybe you didn't realize it as a younger player, as a young man, but the impact that Coach Bowden had on you at that time. Because I'm guessing over the years, and I've talked to many players who played with Coach Bowden and for Coach Bowden, they talked about how that relationship carries them through many years of their lives, not just when they played. But tell me about Coach Bowden and the impact that he had made on your life at such a younger age.
Well, Jason, a lot, I get asked that question a lot, and man, I have to fast forward to when Coach Bowden really meant the most to me. It would have been after my playing career.
Okay.
I mean, I knew who he was. I knew his character, and I got to experience that firsthand playing for him. But it's different when you're a part of a program and you're with a coach every day and you see him, and then when you leave, that's when you really get to see the character of a coach, man. And, through all those difficult times that I endured, I just mentioned the loss of my son. And then another era of my life where I ended up going to prison. Coach Bowden was the one that, was that mainstay, that coach that was going to love you through and through everything. I mean, even when I made the choice to go to Mississippi to serve in the role I am in now, I consulted with him. He gave me the advice of how to go and how to be effective, and to follow God's calling. And, I'll never forget the advice he told me. He said, Sammy, you're prepared to go and do the work there at Ole Miss. He says, well, let me just remind you of something, right? God is not concerned with your abilities. He's concerned with your availability. So you go there and you make yourself available to those coaches and those athletes. So it's those times that I treasure the most about Coach Bowden. And that's when I was an adult man, going through life, going through difficult times. I sat in prison in 1998. I got called to the warden's office, right? And it was the coaches at Florida State, and Coach Bowden initiated asking me to be able to record a message to the football team from a federal prison. Now that's
Wow.
influence, and this coach loved me enough that even in the darkest of my times, he felt like, man, he's got something to add to people. So he's the one that helped encourage me and to know outside of my mom and dad, Coach Bowden was probably the most influential man I've ever met. And he's the one that let me know that in spite of, shortcomings and failures, man, that's what God can use to lift not only you up, but to bless other people if you're willing and if you're available. So
Mm.
my relationship with him goes way past the Florida State years.
That's such a great reminder. And we're going to talk about those really low times for you in a second, but that's such a great reminder that when somebody is in your life and they don't give up on you and they don't push you aside, where I'm sure that could have easily been the case, where he's impacting so many current players and playing, coaching at that time, but he didn't. That's just such a great reminder for all of us, I think, when somebody's going through a difficult season of life, to not just throw them out, right? Not just get rid of them, but to kind of to believe in them and to inspire them to know that they're still valuable and have a purpose.
Exactly. And man, that's one of the things that I get to challenge coaches on now. And, that's probably one of my sticklers and one of my main focal points and one of the main things that I bring up, during times where I'm having coaches devotionals, with our guys at Ole Miss. And I remind them of, man, the great responsibility that they have as a coach. Certainly you want to win games, right? That's probably the most important thing. When you get a job like that, it's high profile jobs, you get paid a whole lot of money, man, you want to win games. But I believe that God's call for coaches, and the most important thing is to impact lives, man. Be a difference maker in those young men's lives. Help them navigate through life. Give them some tools that are going to help them be successful away from the football game. We have a lot of young men today that and I'm sure it's like this on every campus, man. They didn't have a father figure like I had.
Mm.
They didn't have a mother that was and a father that was in that home, and so it's coaches' responsibilities, man, that have a family, that are raising kids, right, and that are coaching and that have wives, to show these young men, man, what it looks like to be a man of faith and a man that's following God's calling, and they're pursuing things other than just the win-loss column. And so that was Coach Bowden in a nutshell, man. It was important to him how his players lived life 10 years after leaving him, leaving that program, seeing how they had progressed in life.
Hey guys, let's take a quick break from our conversation here on Sports Spectrum's podcast to tell you about this 52-week increase devotional. I am so excited about this book. It's out now. It's available for everyone to get themselves a copy. And we've been thinking about this for a while here at Sports Spectrum. What's a book that we can create, a resource that we can create using the interviews and the conversations that we've had here on this show, and have it be in a book form, really a devotional form that you can go through for an entire year with yourself, with your teammates, with people in your small group. Maybe you're a coach and you have players that you want to go through. Maybe you're looking for, as a mentor, to be a mentee to somebody, and you have this devotional that you can go through with them. This Increase 52-week devotional, I got to tell you, I'm so proud of it, and I highly recommend you all get yourselves a copy, especially if you love sports and you love Jesus. Inspiring stories of faith in Christ from the world of pro sports. The Increase 52-week devotional. You can get your copy today at theincrease.com. Very simple. Theincrease.com, where all of our resources are there, including this devotional, theincrease.com, or you can get your copy on Amazon. The 52-week Increase devotional. Get your copy today. We're so glad to have Sammy Smith here on Sports Spectrum today. You mentioned Coach Bowden and played for him. You also played with Deion Sanders and Leroy Butler and so many other future NFLers during your time with Florida State, and that culminated with you being selected 9th overall to Dan Marino, Don Shula, and the Miami Dolphins. When you get to the NFL, you mentioned the loss of your son. I'm just curious, and I don't know what time frame that loss took place, if it was a year or two into your career, but what was the transition to the NFL like? Because you only had a few years there, 3 or 4 years. What was that transition like to come and be a pro football player and be an NFL guy?
Well, certainly, again, it was a dream come true. It was definitely different than being in college. I mean, now you go from playing a game, right, that you love the game, always love the game, but now it's a business. And, you're there with men, and it's a business. And there, you got all kind of different personalities, and you go to different cities. They have the character of the cities are different, and Miami was certainly a different place for me. Coming from a little small town of Apopka, and then going to Tallahassee, and then to end up in Dade County. That certainly was a transition.
Yeah.
But you make the transition, and you give your best effort, man, and you try to enjoy the ride. And I think for guys that leave college and they're going to the NFL, my advice to them, man, would be certainly find your calling in God. Make sure that you're putting him first in everything you do, man. Remember where those talents came from that you have to get you to that point. You didn't do this on your own. God bless you to be able to do that. And I think in some ways I kind of lost that when I got to Miami, and that's the one thing that I do, and did look back and regret is that, man, when I got down there, I think I kind of, lost the connectivity of really who I was, and how I had got there, and how I was blessed to get there, and start to lean in and think that it was me that caused me to be down there. And of course, God has a way of showing us that, we don't operate without him being in the midst of it.
Yeah. And it's so interesting to me too, as I'm hearing that you're playing for Bobby Bowden, and then you transition to the NFL and you're playing for Don Shula. And you're talking about two of the all-time great coaches in what they were doing. Is there a way to compare and contrast those two? I mean, we talked about Coach Bowden, and you hit Don Shula kind of at the tail end, not the tail end. I think he finished his career in like 94, maybe 95. So you're hitting him kind of later in his career, but can you compare and contrast the two coaches? Is that possible in the sense of being in a college world versus a pro football world?
Well, they were certainly had some characteristics that were the same. I mean, they were both winners. They both knew the game, man. They knew how to connect with the players. They knew how to motivate their players. Obviously, Coach Bowden is one of the winningest coaches ever to coach the game in college, and Coach Shula, his records stand for themselves. I mean, he's the winningest coach ever in the NFL. So the similarities there, man, they were really competitive men that knew how to motivate their players, and they knew how to win. They were winners. I would sum Coach Shula and Coach Bowden up in one word, man. They were winners. And it was certainly an honor to be able to play for both of those gentlemen.
So take me to, I think it was 1995, 1996. You're out of the league. You're still in your, late 20s. So you're a very young man still. And you hit rock bottom. You mentioned you were in prison. Can you kind of take us through that time of life for you? And it's interesting how you look back, and certainly it's not something you're proud of, but you also see it as a pivotal moment to help turn your life around to allow God to use you in the way that he's used you today. Can you kind of take us through that?
Well, what I found, Jason, and when I look back at that time is, I think about community, right? Football teams is a community of men, community of guys that are working hard together, man, that are pursuing goals. And I think the transition for players is when that's over, when you leave, where do you find that community? Where's the camaraderie? And, unfortunately for me, I had friends and some family members, man, that I love, still love to this day, that were engaged and involved in something that was certainly something I didn't ever foresee myself getting involved in. But I found that community. And, I would find myself, just a few years after my career was over, 10 months to be exact, 10 months of involvement with an illegal organization, or, being involved with the legal drug sales would radically change my life, man, would just take my life on a journey that I couldn't foresee, and one that, man, when it happened, it was devastating to me, because I had worked so hard to build the name that I had, and to build the character that God had placed in me. That wasn't me. The guy that got arrested and was going to prison, that wasn't Sammy Smith. That wasn't the Sammy Smith that my mom and dad raised, and that Coach Bowden coached, and Coach Shula coached. And I found myself again just lost, man, looking for a group or a community or friends to be a part of, and that's the one that attracted me at the time. But at the same time, I don't regret stuff. I look back now and I say, well, how can I use that, to impact lives and to help other people? And man, I've had so many things in my life, and I was thinking back to again the loss of my son. I lost him to SIDS. And I was speaking at the Orange Bowl FCA breakfast. I think it was 2013, and it must have been 900 people there, right?
Wow. Yeah.
And I got to share a little bit about my story being down in Miami and what happened, and the way the fans treated me after a fumble, and the prison stuff. And then I shared with that group about me losing my son to SIDS, and I had a couple that came up to me afterwards, a ton of people coming up to me, to thank me for sharing my testimony. But this one particular couple had just lost a baby to SIDS, and they wanted to know, how did I get through that? And so I was able to share with them, man. It was a long, arduous journey, getting through it, but God was able, and he helped me through it. So I was able to share with those folks, man, the love of God, and how if you put your trust in him, and you ask him to help you through those difficult times, that he will. So my journey's been a journey that I'm thankful for. I'm thankful that I got the platform that I have now, and I wouldn't have it if I didn't go through those difficult times.
Yeah, it reminds me of the cliche, and a cliche is a cliche for a reason, but it's turning a mess into a message, right? And your mess, if you will, is an amazing message that you can now share. When you're going through that, I believe it was 7 years that you were in prison. Where was the moment when you recognized that you could have this message to share in spite of the mess that kind of was taking place?
I would tell you probably one of the most pivotal moments was, I already referenced it, and that's when Coach Bowden and the staff at Florida State reached out to me during a difficult time for Florida State. I think that was during the time when they had the issue. It was Peter Warwick's time, and Coach Bowden, just wanted me to be able to share with them, man, about making great choices. Living in the moment that God has given you, to be the best that you can be with the talents he's given you. And I remember that message, profoundly. And I think that was a pivotal moment to let me know that, man, in spite of all this stuff that I've gone through, in spite of where I'm sitting, right, in prison, that God could still use me to impact people's lives. And, from that, I had the warden come up to me a few weeks later, and he says, would you be willing to go out and speak in this community at some high schools? So from prison, federal prison in Edgefield, South Carolina, I was able to leave and go around that, community there, and to share my story with those folks there. So, I think that would be certainly the most pivotal moment to let me know that I was on to something that God could use if I would just be willing to allow him to use that situation to bless people.
Wow. I mean, you're in prison and they're taking you to schools to tell people about your story, and you're still there. That's crazy to me. And that's awesome. At the same time that even a warden or somebody was recognizing that in you. So when you got out, What became your purpose after that? You know, when you knew that, okay, I did my time here, it's time to get out, because it was a few years until FCA and all of that came about, where you became, you know, or had an opportunity to kind of be a team chaplain and speak and share your story. But what was that newfound purpose for you when you know, left prison and came back into society?
Well, when I got out of prison, I really wanted to just live a nice, quiet life, right? And I would get asked on numerous occasions to go and speak at things. And I would always, feel rewarded going to small little things. Like they had an organization here in Orlando. I think it was called Recover Orlando or Recovery Orlando. And I spoke a few times at that, and that was usually to just, 20, 30 youth kids. And that was my comfort zone, right? And then Wave Robinson, it was Frank Reynoso that told you to connect with me, that I worked with FCA. He's the connection that connected me and you together.
That's right.
But Wave Robinson was the multi-area director here for FCA, and I didn't know him or Frank. I had never met these guys. And Wave called me, I think it was 2010. And he says, man, I've heard a lot about your story. I don't even know how Wave got my phone number, right? He says, but I've heard a lot about your story. He says, man, we got Capital One Bowl FCA breakfast here. We got Alabama and I think it was Michigan State that are coming. And man, there'll probably be 900 to 1,000 people at this breakfast. Would you be interested in coming and sharing your testimony and being our guest speaker? Right. And I told Wade, right, we're on my cell phone. I said, well, Wade, I'm going to have to get back with you, man. I got to check my schedule to make sure I'm clear to do that, right? And when I hung up the phone with him, God spoke to me right then. And he says, now, you're available. How long are you going to run away from these great opportunities for you to share in front of a lot of people? You promised me you were going to do this in prison, which I did.
Wow.
And so I called Wade back literally probably less than 2 minutes. And we joke about that today because I said, man, he says that's the fastest anyone got back to me, about a speaking engagement. But I went and I did that event, man, and it really changed my life, man, to know that, I could share. And again, my story would impact so many people. And I had players from Alabama, players from Michigan State coming up to me afterwards, thanking me for my testimony. Some of them were engaged in some things at that time that they knew could be detrimental to them, and they shared it with me. That, man, thank you, for sharing this. I'm not going to do some of the things that I'm engaged in right now. I'm going to change my life, and so that to me is that's more rewarding than running touchdowns for the Miami Dolphins or running touchdowns for Florida State, winning a football game for Florida State, all right, is when I know that someone's been impacted in a positive way, man, and now they want to know more about our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, right? That's the win for me.
That's the win for eternity, not just for you. And that's an amazing mindset to have and to grasp that as a follower of Christ for all of us listening. And our audience is mostly people of faith who love sports. And I think if they could just grasp that we're talking about eternity, there's something bigger and more purposeful than, and winning games are great. Listen, I want my teams to win every time I watch them. And I love sports and I love competition, but we're talking about eternal ramifications here. I have to imagine, as you think about the main message that you want people to hear when they listen to this about your life, that's kind of where it steers to now.
No doubt, man. What I want people to know is that, man, life's going to throw you some curveballs. You're not going to do everything great, precisely right. You're going to make mistakes, right? But, man, we serve a God that loves us. And, man, he'll pursue us to the ends of the earth, right? To offer us the opportunity at salvation, to accept his son, the perfect gift that he gave us. And that's one of the things I tell all of our coaches, even when we get new coaches, when we start the season off, we got new guys and we have our first meeting where we're going to go through a series of, 12 weeks of stuff. Like we did 12 weeks this year during the football season, that we would come together and we have a discussion topic. And I tell them up front, look, don't come in here looking at, Sammy Smith as, man, I got it all together. I say, I'm flawed just like you guys, right? I need your prayers just as much as I'm going to be praying for you. And I want this time to be a time that we all can grow. I don't want to be sitting up here and talking for 45 minutes and not having interaction.
Yes.
I need to have interaction from you guys, because you all have experiences that can help me along the way. So I think that, man, that's awesome when you get a bunch of men together that are in their roles as coaches, but man, they're pursuing and wanting to know more about Christ, and they're wanting to be better. They want to be better husbands. They want to be better fathers, man. They want to be better men in their community, right? They want to be better coaches. They want to know how to mentor their guys, right? And to be able to help their guys grow off the field. And again, man, I can't ask for a better reward than when I see that happening with coaches and with players. That means the world to me.
Well, Sammy, thank you again for sharing your story. It's a really powerful one. It's one that encourages me. I know it's one that is encouraging so many, and I'm just praying for you, my friend. Keep impacting the people that you're impacting, the souls that we want to see, in heaven someday, all of us together. Thanks for doing the work that you're doing, and thanks for joining us.
Jason, anytime, man. I appreciate you. Thank you for having me on your show, and let's do it again sometime.
And many thanks to Sammy Smith for being here today on Sports Spectrum. What a story he has. I mean, to think about where he was and where he is now, and no, he didn't make it into the Hall of Fame. He didn't have that 10-year, legendary football career that I'm sure the Miami Dolphins hoped for when they drafted him. But at that point, when he's in prison and he realizes that God has a greater purpose for him than just playing football. And now look at what he's doing. He's still in the game of football, but he's talking about Jesus. He's preaching Jesus. He's sharing faith and hope and encouragement with others. And his story is just a powerful one. I love redemption stories like Sammy Smith. And so we appreciate him for being here today on Sports Spectrum. We thank you as well for tuning in. We really do appreciate it. Again, before we say goodbye, a couple things. First, check out our website, sportspectrum.com, which has all of our content, all of the information, resources, devotionals, podcasts that you're looking for when it comes to sports and faith. Tons of content, all available for free at our website, sportspectrum.com. And whatever app you're listening to this podcast on, first of all, thank you for listening, but click that subscribe or that follow button on this podcast, Sports Spectrum, so that you never miss an episode. Releasing 3 to 4 times a week. We want to make sure that you don't miss the next episode or any future episodes that come out with regards to our Sports Spectrum podcast. And so by clicking subscribe or follow, it helps you never miss an episode. We appreciate you guys. We really do. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Stay safe. Stay connected to that vine, that Jesus vine. Stay connected to the Lord, and we'll see you next time right here on Sports Spectrum.